Okay. So question number one, if you can tell me, what is righteousness? If you can raise your hand, tell me. Be bold. Yes, thank you.
To me, righteousness is living a life that pleases God.
Amen, amen. Yes. Anyone else? And thank you for staying under the 10-second rule. I love you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Oh, yes. Huh? Okay, thank you.
I believe righteousness, you can't have righteousness without Christ. There is no righteousness without him.
Amen, amen. The answer I usually give people when they ask me what is righteousness, I give them the classic answer, which is right standing with God. So right standing with God, what does that mean? You have your circle of friends. Those circle of friends, people you hang with, you're cool with, those are people that are in right standing with you. Those people you kind of avoid, people you don't want to talk to, they're not in right standing with you. So righteous, you're in right standing with God. You're cool with God. Y'all are friends. It's righteousness. So this next question I want to ask is, why is it important to be righteous? Anyone? Okay, so the answer that I would give for today is, without righteousness, you cannot have a relationship with God, and you cannot get into heaven. So remember those two things. First thing, righteous, right standing with God. Secondly, without righteousness, can't have a relationship with him, and you can't get into heaven. So thirdly, how does one become righteous? Oh, there you go. Boom, there it is. The only way to become righteous is by having faith in Jesus Christ. That is the only way. Now, I would like for everybody to repeat after me. I know we're all sleepy, but anyway, just shout out your frustrations for how tired you are. So repeat after me. Say, I am. Oh, I like the way y'all said that. It was like you mean it. I am loved by God. I have favor with the King. I have a connection to the King. I am destined for eternal paradise in the presence of my Creator. I am righteous. I am justified. I am holy. I am destined for glory. Now look at somebody around you and tell them it has nothing to do with me. We could pull up Romans chapter 1, verse 17. New King James Version. You can turn to whatever version you want in the Bible, but I like the New King James Version for today. If you got it, say I got it. If you need a second, say wait a minute. Awesome, y'all are quick. Okay, it says, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed, from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. The just, for those of you who don't know, just is basically the same as righteous in here. So I'm going to say the righteous will live by faith. Y'all remember that point. The righteous will live by faith. We're going to be building up to this verse. So keep it in mind, all right? Now, we've already established it's important to be righteous because unless you're righteous, you can't get into heaven. So if I walk up to you and ask you, how do you become righteous? It's the same as if I asked you, how do you get into heaven? Or how do you get saved? How do you receive salvation? It really is actually quite simple. All you got to do is hear the gospel, then believe it. That's it. Hear the gospel, then believe it. So I'm going to tell you the gospel, you know, just in case some of you haven't heard it, misunderstood it, or you forgot. We all need a brush up every now and then. But also, as I give it to you, I want to emphasize the fact that your righteousness has nothing to do with you. Our salvation has nothing to do with us. You can look at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. There it is. For by, and if y'all could read this with me, ready? And I'll stop when I tell you to stop. Go ahead. Stop. For by what? You have been saved for by grace you have been saved. What is grace? Basically, it is the kindness of God. You have your other definitions out there, but for today, I'm just going to let you know grace is the kindness of God. And it's only because God is so kind that you are able to receive salvation. Only because of that. Has nothing to do with you. So let's look at it. Long time ago, way back when, all the way back when, with Adam and Eve, first human beings on this earth, and God gave them one command, and they broke it. It's like you tell your friends, you only had one job. You couldn't do that. God gave them one command, and they couldn't keep it. So when they disobeyed God, they released sin into the world. Now all of mankind, Adam and Eve's descendants, you and me, we have inherited from our first parents a sinful nature. Thanks, Mom and Dad. A sinful nature. The very essence of who we are is rebellion against God. And because of that, Romans chapter 3, verses 10 through 12, in the Bible, 3, verse 10 through, no, I don't need that pulled up. I'm just going to say it. But he says that there is no one who is righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. And here's the part that got me. There is no one who seeks God. And I'm like, I'm praying to you every night. I'm reading my scriptures. I'm going to church every Sunday. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And you want to tell me there is no one that seeks God? No one. Then it goes on to say, all have turned away and become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. In other words, no one is right with God. Jesus said, you can prophesy and cast out demons in my name and still appear before me and hear me tell you, depart from me. I never knew you. You can achieve all you want in this world and still fail to measure up to his standard. Why? Because God demands absolute perfection. Absolute perfection. It's got to all be right. Can't have a mark on it or he's sending it back. And we can't get mad at him for demanding that because he's perfect. He actually deserves it. A perfect God deserves perfection. So let me give you a clear picture of him demanding absolute perfection. In the Old Testament, he gave his people laws, about 611 laws. And he said, you are responsible for keeping all of them. All of them. We can't even keep the laws that we give to ourselves. How many New Year's resolutions have you broken? And that was just one. But 611. And James 2 verse 10 said that if somehow you manage to keep all 611 laws and you slipped up and stumbled on just one, you've broken them all. You can do this much good, but that much bad wipes out all of your work. And God doesn't measure sin the same way we do. He doesn't see big sin, little sin. All he sees is sin. You're like, well, God, he murdered 10 people. And he's like, yeah, well, you lied. Send them both to the chair. You're like, well, brother so-and-so, he cheats. And he's like, yeah, well, you make an obscene joke, so send them both. All he sees is sin. And if it's sin, here's the scariest part. Before I say what I was just about to say, Romans 6, verse 23. Here's the scariest part of all this. It says, for the wages of sin is what? Death. Is what? Death. The wages of sin is death. That means the only way that I can pay for my sin is through death. I got to die. There's no other way around it. So with God, if it's sin, it's got to die. You're like, well, it's not that big a deal. It doesn't matter. It's sin. You're gone. But now, here's the gospel. God knows this. He knows you're not perfect. He knows that you can't live up to his standards. He knows that the only way for you to pay for sin is through death. He knows you have a sinful nature, yet he still wants to have a relationship with us. He still wants us to spend eternity with us. So what does he do? He sends his son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, so you know he's perfect. So he lives a life that is empty of sin. empty of sin. Why? So that he could be filled to the brim with our sin. Why in the world would you do that? Got filled to the brim with our sin so that he could pay the penalty for us. He died. He paid our penalty for us so that we wouldn't have to. And then you're like, well, why in the world would you do that? Because God, God cannot have a relationship with somebody who's dead. But when I speak of death, y'all like, okay, you can be a Christian, you still die. No, death is separation from God. That's why hell is so terrible, because heaven, you get a completely restored relationship with God. Hell, you can never experience that. Death is separation from God. So Jesus paid the price for you. Then he rose to new life again. Why? So that you'd have the opportunity to live a new life with him, in relationship with him. So now, instead of trying to follow all these laws, trying to be perfect, instead of killing yourself, God says, all you got to do, let's finish Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. Boom. For as by what? Grace you have been saved. God is so kind that he sent his son Jesus Christ to you so that you could be saved. That's God's grace. For by grace you have been saved, and you get it through what? Through faith. So now, instead of having to follow all these rules, trying to live up to a standard you can't possibly live up to, he says all you have to do is have faith in the work of my son. And that's the gospel. Can we give God a hand for that? Amen. Now, church, there's one piece of this puzzle that we are missing. So let's see if we can't find it and put it where it belongs, shall we? Okay. Now, so I have faith. I'm righteous. I'm going to heaven. Now what? I mean, I'm a Christian now. What does a Christian actually do? I guess I should join the church, start listening to gospel music, watching Christian movies with bad actors. I mean, War Room was pretty good. Could watch that movie every day for the rest of my life. I could pray every night, read my Bible. I could get baptized, start living right. That's about 8 rules. About how many before I get to 611? Let's go back to Romans chapter 1, verse 17. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed. And this righteousness is from faith to faith. From faith to faith. Right now, you are living from breath to breath. From the moment the doctor slapped you as a baby, you started breathing. For the rest of your life, you will be breathing. You're living from breath to breath. From the moment you entered this new life, you entered it by faith, and you're supposed to live out the rest of this life from faith to faith. It doesn't switch around and become my work. I got into this thing based on God's grace, so now I'm going to live it based on God's grace. I got into this life by trusting in Jesus Christ, so now I'm going to live it by trusting in Jesus Christ. I got into this based on somebody else's works, so I'm going to live this based on somebody else's works. Holding God's hand is my lifestyle. Now, as prideful as we are, it's hard for a lot of us to live this way because a lot of us like the feel of, I did this. I earned it. You hate getting that trophy when you know you're the worst player on the team. Like, no, I didn't earn this. This is a pity trophy. I feel shame every time I look at it. And it was so bad with me. I never said it out loud, but it was so bad with me. Me personally, I was like, I never said it out loud or acknowledged it, but I was like, can I at least get credit for trusting you? And it's not until recently that I realized how ridiculous that is. You want God to give you credit for trusting him. Let me paint a picture for you so you can see how ridiculous that is. All right, let's imagine we're all standing in a big old crowd looking up at a tall building. And we look up and we see Lois Lane hanging from the ledge. Y'all know who Lois Lane is, right? Okay, I feel bad if I tell you that. But she's not just hanging on the cliff. She's hanging off of a piece of brick that's like sticking out of the side of a building. Too high for her to climb up. There's no windows around here. I just want you to get the picture. There's no way she can get out of this herself. She is hanging from that brick. Nowhere else to go. Superman flies up to her. Superman flies up to her. Superman flies up to her and he says, grab onto me and I'll carry you to safety. Lois Lane trusts Superman. So she grabs onto Superman, follows his instructions, then he flies her down to safety. Now, when he takes her down, who's going to get the praise? Superman or Lois Lane? You're like, Superman, you're so awesome, so great. And Lois Lane, imagine Lois Lane over here like, well, I trusted him. I mean, you laugh at Lois Lane, but isn't that kind of what some of us do? I mean, like, God, I get baptized. I mean, God, I read your scriptures. I follow your instruction. Can I get some credit? All right, so back to Lois Lane. So because Lois Lane trusted Superman, she found out that Superman is able to take her and fly her back down to safety. She found out something about Superman that day. But if she did not trust him, he'd be like, grab onto me, I'll take you to safety. No, I got this. Ugh. Ugh. And she's left with her own strength trying to figure out how to do it herself. But because she trusted in Superman, she found out something about him. And the point I'm trying to get to you is, faith is not supposed to show you how wonderful you are. But faith gives you the opportunity to find out how great your God is. And when you get this and when you grasp it, it changes how you look at everything. You don't look at suffering the same way you look at it. You don't look at it as woe is me and stuff like that. I mean, it feels bad, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to capitalize on this. I want to find out just how awesome my God is. I remember last year in college, my monthly bills come up to about $600 every month. I don't have a job. I was trying to find a job. I got a job. I got paid on commission my entire check after I was fired. My entire check for 3 weeks came out to $22. I'm quite a salesman, aren't I? Anyway, so we're struggling first semester, and we're kind of wondering, am I going to be able to do this? And it's to the point, I love this school. I want to stay here. But I'm hungry. But I don't want to go to my parents and say, Mom, I need such and such. I want her to use every amount of money she has to pay for me to stay in school because I love that place. So I take the last few dollars that I have, and I'm going to Subway. I have about maybe $10, something like that. So I'm going to Subway, about to spend the last few dollars I have, about to get a meal. I'm starving. So homeless guy walks up to me, a friend of mine named James. He walks up to me and he talks about, like, you know, how hungry he is. He's homeless. So I'm like, so I gave him the money. I went back upstairs to my room and I was hungry. So I start talking to my friends, Daniel and Nick, in our lounge area. And I'm like, you know, God is really testing my trust. I mean, like, I'm hungry. So it's like, do you really trust me? Even when you're hungry, will you still trust me? It's difficult to feed someone else when you're starving. So I'm telling them this story, and then when I'm finished, I'm like, yeah, well, guess I'm going to bed now. My friend Nick's like, you like corn dogs? I'm like, what? Like, you like corn dogs? I'm like, yeah, I like corn dogs. He's like, I'm going to get you some corn dogs. So he goes to his room, and I'm sitting there, tears in my eyes, like, oh, my brother's caring for me. So he comes back. I think he's about to make me like a plate of hot dogs just for the night or something. He gives me his entire box of corn dogs so that I won't be hungry for the rest of the week. Now wait, watch this. Now I could tell you this story and say, my faith is so great that I was able to give while I was starving. But instead, I want to tell you that that moment was one of the greatest blessings in my life. Because it was in that moment that I found out that if my food doesn't come from somewhere else, God will bring it from another location. I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. God showed me that if I need it, he will provide it. It is in those moments that you find out how awesome and how loving your God truly is, how much he really cares for you. It's not about building yourself up. It's about finding out how much he loves you. So, my encouragement, dang, 9 minutes left.
That's good.
Well, dang. Anyway, so my encouragement to you is go back home, research this, study it, make it personal. Don't just take my word for it. Go back home, make it personal. Forgive who God told you to forgive. Let go of what God told you to let go of. You're sitting here holding on to grudges. You're like, well, you don't know what such and such did to me, all this stuff, and you're missing out. As long as you're holding on to this and it's about you, you're so caught up in how you feel and what you want, you are missing out on the knowledge, what it feels like to know the character of your divine creator. So don't spend so much time worrying about this and that. Trust God. Trust him. That's what this lifestyle is. You're living from breath to breath. Every day is fresh air. This, you're living from faith to faith. Every moment is a new opportunity to find out something about your God.